Hey everybody, welcome to the Dixiecryptid channel. My name's Cameron Buckner, and all we do here is tell stories. That's all we do. Before we get started, I wanted to show you this shipment I got in from Yowie bars. This is 8 bars of soap and a couple of T-shirts. That's what the box looks like. Let me get it in the frame here so you can see. But I just opened it in the house and show you this T-shirt I bought. I haven't even unraveled it yet. But I bought a gray T-shirt because all my T-shirts are dark. I wear dark T-shirts because they're slimming. They slim me down a little bit. But here's a cool T-shirt I got from Yowie bars, and I love it. I love it. They fit good. The quality of the T-shirt is awesome. That was the back, and this is the front. You get the Yowie bars logo on there. So I bought a T-shirt, but more importantly, I got a bunch of bars of soap. And all of this is new. I've never tried any of this, and I'm just going to go through. This is the Glacier Bar, and it smells great. I think it would be great for men or women. I would have a hard time describing what it smells like, but it's really clean and fresh, and there is a strong scent that would stay on you. Oh man, I love the smell of that. Let's see what else I have. This is the Desert Bar, Dessert. Is that desert or dessert? I don't know. I can't spell. That's the Desert Bar. This is the way Yowie bars come to you. Oh, that smells great. I can't wait to try that. It's similar to the Glacier, but it's a little bit stronger. Here's the Eucalo bar. I bought 2 of each, so I've got eight bars in here. Oh man, I love that. That's got an awesome smell to it. And then last, where is it? Oh, the one I've been waiting on. This is the lemonade stand bar. This was invented by the Yowie brothers' daughters together. They got together and they invented their own bar. And this is I kind of hate to open them because I don't want them to dry out before I use them. And I think you probably get a sticker in a package when you order from them. And I think I saw a keychain. My wife may have pulled that out and put some keys on it because it was so cool. Yeah, I can't feel it in there. Anyway, Yowie Bars is a great soap company. I buy from them. I don't even take the discount. I just buy straight from those guys, and I wash with this soap every day. Never skip a day. I'm always washing with their soap, and I love trying the new soaps, and it's great. Check them out at YowieBars.net or Yowie Bars on Facebook, and use the discount code DC10 to get an additional 10% off at checkout. They would love to hear from you. Go to YowieBars.net and take a look at all their products. Now, let's get on to some stories. Y'all ready? I am. Woo, woo, woo. All right, here we go. All right, we're just going to do one story today, and I've been holding on to this story for 6 or 8 months. I just haven't had a chance to get to it, but it's from my good friend Brett Young, who lives in Australia, and these are Australian, and this is an Australian encounter. And Brett is such a good writer, and this has been at the top of my list for all that time. But I just felt like I'd already done one of Brett's stories, so I thought I would, push a bunch of people in front of this one. But today, it's a good time to do it out here on Sunday. How do y'all like my avatar-themed image here? Get me off the page here. Isn't that cool? I don't know. I just find these on the internet and stick them in here. They look pretty good. Let's start with Brett's story. Brett Young. Brett has a YouTube channel too, but he doesn't really deal with cryptids. He deals with Australian wildlife, and he shares with you some of the landmarks close to where he lives and other places. that you might find interesting in Australia. And he's a good commentator. You know, he's got a few that are cryptid based. They're not stories. They're figures that the Aboriginal people carved on walls and things like that that are real interesting to me. Matter of fact, I've watched that one video probably 6 or 8 times. But here we go with Brett Young's story. And this is a long one, so I'm going to read every word. He says, "Good day, Cam. Y'all excuse me if I break into an occasional horribly reproduced Australian accent on some of these words, but when I'm reading Brett stuff or anybody from Australia, I can hear their accent when they're doing this. Here, as promised, is the written account of my second experience with our large hairy forest friends. Although I know many of your listeners would be happy to bet their bottom dollar that they are far from friendly. I guess it's just a generic term that I use because when I go bush into their domain, I try to think friendly, positive thoughts, which isn't always an easy thing to do. But on the off chance that these creatures are telepathic, and there's really no reason to assume they're not, I want them to be picking up good vibes from this little black duck. Having said that, the beast of a creature that came very close to me on Mount Warning that night sounded anything but friendly. Far from it, in fact, but I'm here to tell the tale, so I guess it could have been much worse. I know that his bite would have been much worse than his bark. And you already know something of my background, so let that suffice, and I will get on with the story. Regarding his background, at the end screen, I will upload the last story that Brett sent that I put in a video or a podcast. It's actually probably been more than a year, but it's real interesting stuff. So here's his story, the Mount Warning Roarer. Myself and my mate Brian, who I was living with at the time, had each taken 2 weeks paid holiday from work to go to a spot Brian swore we would love. I remember at the time that I'd never even heard of it before. I should have, as it was relatively well known. It's a place called Mount Warning. Mount Warning is 1,200 meters high, give or take, and is just a big, splendid jungle-covered hill with a rock summit that sticks up from the coastal hinterland in far northern New South Wales. The thing apart from its beauty and historical relevance with the indigenous people of that area is that it is the first place to receive the rays of sun in Australia, being the highest easternmost point in the country. So it attracts a lot of sun lovers, hippies, alternative types, and the like. Plus a lot of people like me who love nature and want to see the place for its own, and maybe the sun thing too. So the three of us took a train from Sydney to, I can't pronounce this word, Murwillumbah, where we hired a car and a big tent, a tent big enough for the three of us and our gear. We drove to a place right at the foot of the mountain, a kind of caravan park with camping sites too. Back then it was called Wollumban Wildlife Reserve, which in retrospect turned out to be funny. My mate Brian is a herpetologist, and a damn good one. He still is, and ostensibly the reason for all of us going all the way that far north, right on the Queensland border, was so that he could do some snake hunting and collecting, which he was permitted to do. So seeing as FJ was no fan of potentially fatal pieces of rope, Brian trained me up as his assistant. Basically, I helped him catch and bag. I would also render first aid should we cop a bite from a nasty species. Each day we would head out into the vastness of the surrounding area, looking for snakes along the roadsides and near the creeks, each time probing a bit further up the mountain road and its verges. At night, we would walk to a large wayside spot 2 kilometers from the campsite with our guitars and gear, and we would cook our dinner on an open fire beside the nice clear creek that ran along behind the clearing. We would sometimes catch yabbies in the creek and cook them in the billy right there. We'd stay up there well into the night and then walk back down the dark, unlit road to the campsite so we could sleep. This routine worked really well. It wasn't school holidays or anything, but in the caravan park there were still quite a few holiday makers and gray nomads and such, and so by heading up the road each night, when it started getting dark, we would be away from the other people and be at ease to make some noise, have a few ales, whoop it up a bit, and carry on like you do when you are in your 20s. One night, one very dark night, Brian explained that on moonless nights a lot more snakes and things are apt to move around as it is safer for them from nocturnal predators. There being less light than normal, which made sense to me. Plus it had been a very hot day, it being late November and coming into summer. Their seasons are flipped from ours. Our summers are their winters and vice versa. And he knew that some snakes would be soaking up the last of the heat from the sealed roads up in the bush, and it was a very good chance we could bag some pythons. And as it turned out, he was exactly right. Our other mate, FJ, wasn't keen on going up and past our fire pit area on this particular evening. He had a book to read and just wanted to kick back in the tent and plink quietly on his acoustic and have some time for him, which was cool with us. So Brian and I took the snake bags, we took a good stick, a dolphin torch, and off we went. We stopped at the fireplace and boiled the billy for a cup of tea as the sun set. Once it was dark, seriously dark, we headed up the road that leads to the peak of the mountain. It's a long walk to the top, 8 kilometers from where we were. He hadn't made any plans to go all the way to the top, just walk along and bag some snakes, enjoy the night's warmth and the music. I guess it would have been 9 or 10 that night. Neither of us had watches, and mobile phones hadn't been invented yet. We had one 8-foot carpet snake, which is a beautiful python, a few brown tree snakes in the bags, and were just quietly chatting, no torch on, for quite some time, so as to let our eyes get accustomed to the darkness. And when I say dark, man, I mean really dark. It was a different kind of bush up there from what I was used to. Up north, it is tropical and more like jungle than bush. The thick green tangle whirl came right up to the roadsides on both sides of the road. Except it wasn't green. It was just an all-encompassing living blackness of vines and palms and figs and ferns and trees that sting and stab and things that want to bite you everywhere you step. It's not a silent darkness either. The forest is full of life and movement, with things that croak and squeak and chatter and squabble and scurry and fly and hum past your face and flap into you and scrabble in the branches above you in the black. We were walking slowly along this dark tree-covered tunnel of a road to our left, and I heard a branch crack. Now, many Australian trees are self-pruning, especially in summer. Eucalyptus especially. They drop their branches all the time. This is one reason so many Australian birds and marsupials have adapted to live in hollows made where the tree branches have come off. The animals and trees have evolved together, so hearing a branch crack, a thud, is nothing unusual, usually. We didn't even mention it. We heard it and barely acknowledged it as we kept chatting in the dark, barely able to see each other, though we were right side by side. A few moments later came another crack. This was different altogether. This was quite close, maybe a stone's throw away, and it came from down the gully that we knew was beside us. It wasn't deep, maybe 30 meters. It was just a fold in the land that the runoffs used to join with the creek. Now this was a break, the sound of something literally breaking, maybe the trunk of a fairly large sapling. It just went bang, more like a gunshot than a branch breaking. You could tell that this tree didn't break like a deadfall. It just got broken green, and it was loud and it was close. We stopped, but before either of us called to say, "Oh, crap," from the same spot as the snap came a sound like a cough. I've often described it as a bit like someone clearing their throat, like a big man going, or a cross between that and a cough. I can make a sound pretty close to it. We turned to each other and Brian spoke first, but all he got was, "Did you hear that?" Suddenly the air was torn apart, like as if by thunder. The loudest and most horrific, ear-splitting, blood-curdling scream, yell, roar hit us like a bomb blast. The sound literally vibrated our bodies and in our ribs and skulls, and it seemed to take heat and strength out of us, if only for a moment. It lasted for what seemed like an impossible time. Maybe it was about as long as one can hold its breath, maybe shorter. I can't with impunity say how long that scream went for, but it was long and drawn out and the most ferocious and frightening sound I've ever heard. As it tailed off, there was another huff or a cough at its end, and the two of us stood, weak in the knees and bones, waiting for the hammer to fall. It sounded like the warning of certain death to come at any second. We had suddenly plummeted into a few horrible moments to the very bottom of the food chain. It was a bit like when you're swimming out in the surf behind the break and you see a fin and you don't know if it's a dolphin or not, and you suddenly realize that you might be on something's menu and there's nothing you can do about it. So you accept the fact that there are only three outcomes. 1, you will make it safely to shore. 2, you're going to get injured, possibly badly. And 3, you're going to die today. Well, whatever made that sound was close, and it was the king of the effing jungle. Years after this incident, I would have the pleasure of having a male lion roar from 20 meters behind me in the dark. A lion's roar, as almost bowel-moving as it was nowhere near as loud and powerful and barrel-chested as this thing. Seriously, the Yowie that made that roar must have been frickin' huge. In those first few moments after the scream, nothing happened. There was complete silence. Not a cricket chirped, not a possum stirred, not a frog croaked. Everything was silent as a grave. It was as if that roar had sucked the vitality out of every living thing in that area. Not just that area either, but the whole bloody mountain seemed to hold its breath. I was snapped out of my shock by Brian, whose face was almost nose to nose with mine as he said, "Okay, Harry Butler, what the F was that?" Now, please allow me to just give a very quick heads up on that last comment for your American listeners. Harry Butler is a well-loved Aussie naturalist who had a popular TV show on the ABC called Harry Butler in the Wild. We had all grown up with this show. In fact, Harry was one of the people to inspire the late Steve Irwin to take the path that he took in life. So there's Brian, eyes like dinner plates, waiting for me to give him a sensible answer, and I could not. He knew that I was very good in the bush. He knew I had heard everything there was to hear in the bush. He knew I was running through my noise catalog in my mind, trying really hard to equate that sound with something in my Brett's book of bush noises. And after a moment, I gave him my honest answer. "I'll be effed if I know, mate." And then it hit me. I was back in WJ at night with the same bloke, and I was looking at the Yowie I'd seen all those years ago, and I knew what it was in an instant that was out there and had made that sound. And I said, "Wait, I think I might know what this is, mate." Brian, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him look before, said, "Oh, yeah?" I said, "Yeah, do you want to know what I reckon it was?" He looked right into my face. I could practically hear his gears turning. He took a moment and he said, "No." Suddenly, I wasn't scared. Maybe it was the pleading look in Brian's eyes that made me think he was relying on me for a solid and helpful idea. The third response, I call it, there is flight, fight, and a total complacence of ambivalence. So I finally said, "Well, mate, If it's big enough to sound like that and it wants us, we are effed. And Brian replied, we're closer to the peak than the camp. Let's have some balls and just keep going. And then, and only then, did we remember we had a torch. It had been gripped in my hand the whole time, and although our minds were still full of tilt, that roar had frozen us to the spot, and it took a moment to thaw. So I shined the light straight forward to the spot where the sound had come from, and despite the rays barely penetrating that vast green wall, a second after flicking it on, there came a thud like someone dropping a bag of cement from the back of a truck. We felt it through the road. We knew it was a foot thump, a stamp, like what an annoyed horse would do, only so much more powerful. Okay, you don't like the light either, I thought. So I shined it down the corridor of the road behind us. Nothing. Same in front, just more road and jungle. And I turned off the light. So we continued up the road, slowly at first, and then with an F.U. King Kong attitude, completely unarmed, of course. The noises of the bush came back, but conversation had begun to die away, and after about another 20 minutes or so, Brian just stopped and said to me very quietly and seriously, Bretto, I can feel it watching us, mate. Can you feel that? Of course I can, mate, but he hasn't made us move on yet. That's a good thing. Nah, said my mate. Dude, this feels wrong. And when the road hits the base of the path, it stops at this little car park thing, and then there's this little rocky, windy footpath to the summit, like through the forest, mate. This was new info and straight away changed my mind. Suddenly, that single-lane road felt like a much safer line to take than to blunder in total darkness right into this thing's backyard, with a torch or no torch. The blacktop felt like a wiser of two options. Okay, mate, let's go home. We did 180 degree and walked back down that black as pitch road, past where the roar happened, down and down and down, watched all the way, I have no doubt. We got back to our tent at about midnight. FJ was still awake. He had been filming some footage on the old microcassette video camera we had taken with us to catalog the holiday. In the clip, he was laying back with a cigarette and telling the camera that he could hear some very strange noises coming from up the mountain, and that he was glad he was staying right here. He hoped we were okay. I still have the footage, and it's a shame he didn't get any of what he was hearing on tape, but the gist of it is that he was 5 kilometers away, and he heard the roar. So you can imagine what standing a stone's throw away did to us. We sat in the tent and we talked about it, had a couple of stiff drinks and turned in, and crashed out like the proverbial. Now here's the bit that drove it all home for me and my mate. Next morning, it was sunny, perfect, and people out and about, and all the reality around you makes your logic denial thing kick in, and you wonder, did that stuff really happen? You get it the day after every real experience was something otherworldly. You guys know what I mean. But we went to the little shop in the caravan park that morning for some stuff. And it was like a little general store beside the park's in-ground swimming pool. Postcards, post office, milk bar, etc. I joked about something to Brian about the last night's goings-on, and the really nice bloke that ran the shop just upped and said, "You blokes up near the big fella on the mountain last night, eh?" Or something like that. It was years ago. Anyway, this bloke goes on to tell us that it is plain local knowledge, and it has been for a long time. There is a Yowie up on Mount Warning, and there always will be, and most people know that. He went on to say that the indigenous people of the region would go miles out of their way to avoid that mountain back in their day. He told us about how the lady had the little place on the left after the kindergarten in Wollumbi had her little terrier just swooped up from its running tether by that big booger in one hand as it went straight through her laundry line. The dog didn't even yelp. It just crushed it in one hand as the Yowie went straight on through her yard, into the bush, dragging fresh laundry after it. I had been past her house a dozen times or more. So even though we didn't need to be, we felt pretty validated by the bloke in the shop, because even though he may have been stretching the truth, even a tad, I don't know. But I know what we heard on Mount Warning that night, and it was big. It was a bloody yowie. It could have been nothing else. We don't have bears, we don't have cougars, wolves, or the sorts of land predators that can growl or roar like that. We don't have huge deer like moose or elk or in our forest that might bellow pretty well. It was no koalas fighting or possums going at it for fruit or bats screeching. Cam, they are real. There are yowies. You might call them Sasquatch. It is mysterious, but it's really no mystery. It's very plain and simple. And he signs off Bretto. I hope I didn't mess that up trying to imitate their accents, but I love the way Brett writes, and he can take the stories and just make them come alive in my mind. And I just appreciate Brett Young so much. I can't remember in the last story I did with his the last video I did with his story, if he even wanted me to mention his name. And so, Brett, you can kick me if I'm wrong, but you called yourself Bretto in the story, so I felt free to give everybody your name. Plus, I'd love for people to see your videos on your YouTube channel. Brett, thanks for the story. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. See you next time.